So I hope you enjoyed the demonstration, and now it's on to my favorite part of the process, the post-production. And this is where you kind of see your time-lapse come to life, or maybe it crashes and burns and you go cry in a corner. So the software I'm using today is called Timelapse Pro 5, and this works in conjunction with Adobe Lightroom. And I love using this software as it kind of acts as a quality control feature, and there's also a super simple workflow of how to create your first time-lapse. So what you want to do is import your sequences, and I've been super organized and kind of split my time-lapse sequences up into little subfolders. This just makes it a bit neater and a bit easier. There is an import function on Timelapse, but this is just way more easy and more neat. So once you kind of click on your time-lapse, it's going to load it in like this. And as you can see, you got all your metadata and things like that. And the first thing you want to do is go into Keyframe Wizard. Now what this does is it adds in keyframes, and these are the things you actually edit in Lightroom, because to edit kind of over 200 photos, it's just going to take forever, and you're also not going to get it very precise. So what you want to do is add in some keyframes. Now if you're doing a sunset, it's going to maybe start light and get darker, so you're going to want to kind of balance that exposure out and kind of keep everything consistent. However, as I shot this on manual mode, and it's pretty consistent with the lighting, like nothing really changes, I'm probably just going to use 2 keyframes for this today. So what I want to do is go down here, and these diamonds represent a keyframe, so I'm just going to click on that. Another way to do it is to go on the Keyframe Wizard here and click on the pluses, but this is just a bit more precise by clicking it on there. So once you've got your keyframes in place, you go to save. And what that does is it saves all the metadata to the camera files. And now it's ready to be put into Lightroom. So now the next phase is to go drag to Lightroom. So I'm just going to click on that. And I'm using 2 screens today, so I'm just dragging it into Lightroom right now. Just close this window, bring in Lightroom. Awesome. So as you can see, it's brought in all the photos here ready to be imported. Now I've already imported these, so I don't have to do it again. But what you do is just go and import, and I'm just going to click on cancel. And yeah, as you can see, we've got all our images here. It's all kind of very dark, very moody. And what we're going to try and do today is just brighten those up. What you want to do is just to get your keyframes is go down to filter and click on keyframes here. And the way that keyframes are marked is with like a star rating system. So anything 4-star or higher is a keyframe. So we're going to start on our first keyframe here. And I'm just clicking on D, and that brings us up to the develop tab. Yeah, and as you can see, super, super dark. So what you want to do is just going to bang up that exposure straight away. Maybe kind of bring down the highlights as well. And also kind of bring the blacks down with it. Maybe kind of pop the whites up a bit as well. And boost the shadows just to kind of get it a bit nicer. And also going to boost our saturation and the vibrance as well, and sort of make it a bit colourful. I find sometimes when you export these, it kind of gets dulled down a bit in the export phase, so I kind of like to add a bit of colour in this phase here, because it kind of gets reduced when you export it as a ProRes. So once you're kind of happy with it, maybe add a bit of clarity as well. And it's kind of, you got to be careful here not to go crazy with it. Like it could be tempting to kind of boost the clarity because it looks cool, or kind of boost the shadows. But that's just going to make your time-lapse look over-processed and just very, very ugly. So just going to bring those back. And boost the exposure here as well. Cool. So yeah, as you can see, that took about a minute. And this is what it looks like. And this is where we got it. So yeah, super, super quick and super easy. Now the next thing you want to do is apply this to your next photo. So just going to do that and go up to here and click on this little script icon and just go sync keyframes. Ooh, do that. Cool. So there you go. And that's just synced out time-lapse across here. And I might actually boost the shadows up here, because as the time-lapse moves, you kind of see more of this roof, and it's quite cool to see that. So it's going to bring those up a bit more, maybe just boost the exposure very slightly. And there's also noise reduction in Lightroom. So sometimes you can just apply maybe like a tiny bit of that, but you don't want to do too much of it because it's just going to make your image very soft. Like if you kind of go in, you can kind of see. So yeah, just add in a tiny bit of noise reduction. Cool. So there you go. That is our 2 keyframes done and edited, and it's looking great already. Now you want to go back and hit G on your keyboard, and that just brings up the grid view in the library. And we've got 2 keyframes here, but as you can see, our sequence still hasn't got those effects applied to them. Now, if you're not using LR Timelapse, the easiest way to do this is to highlight everything and go sync. Actually, you might need to do that in the develop tab. Go sync, and that would sync all your settings across. However, we don't want to do that because we want to have a gradual kind of change of the values from our first keyframe to our last. So what we're going to do is just go back into grid view, get our keyframes to pop up again. And the way that Lightroom and LR Timelapse talk to each other is through the metadata. So you go up to metadata and you want to click save metadata to files. And what that's going to do is just save all this information to the file and make it easy to re-import that into LR Timelapse. So next you want to go onto LR Timelapse and just kind of load this back up. And as you can see, we've made our change in Lightroom, but it hasn't kind of been brought across. So you want to click on reload, and that's just going to load in all the adjustments you made. And as you can see, it's sort of picked up on it here. And the next step is to go auto transition. Now what this phase does is it kind of gradually adjusts the values from the first keyframe to the last. If you've got different keyframes, it will kind of do it in between those. And yeah, it didn't take very much time at all. So next you want to go visual previews. And what this does is kind of makes like little DNG files. And as you can see, yeah, it's starting to populate here. And these are all your little images. And shortly you'll be able to kind of play back your time lapse and kind of check the exposure and see if all your adjustments have worked out nicely. Perfect. Now all our photos have imported in nicely and the little previews have been made. So I'm just going to click play. As you can see, that is looking very, very nice. Yeah, so I'm very happy with that. Cool. But to go a next step further, and this is something you can't do in Lightroom, we want to kind of get rid of some of that flicker. Now flicker can happen from when you're taking a photo in like aperture priority mode. The exposures could be different between the different photos. Or if you're shooting in manual mode like we are today, you may not get that much flicker, but when you go into the post-production and start to edit the photos, you can actually reintroduce flicker into your time lapse. So it's always best practice to kind of turn on your visual deflicker. So I'm just going to go for the basic settings today and click apply. Now you can apply this as many times as you want, but because there's kind of lots of lights turning on, it might freak the software out a bit and might actually make the time lapse more flickery. So I'm just going to use the basic setting today and see how that one turns out. And you can sort of see it here. It's kind of smoothing out this luminance curve and getting rid of all those kind of nasty spikes. And that will be what is causing the flicker, those little spikes. And just going to click on play. Yeah, and look at that, nice and buttery smooth. Perfect. Cool. So now that we are happy with how everything's kind of turned out, we are going to go over to Lightroom now and export our image sequence. Cool. So we have got our image sequence here, and as you can see, we've got our 2 keyframes. So we want to go over here and do full sequence. And we've got our nice kind of edited photo here, but this whole sequence is still ugly and dark. So you want to go Command A, highlight everything, go over to the metadata, and go read metadata from files. And what this is going to do is just going to pull up all the adjustments that LR Timelapse made to our photos. And as you can see, it's sort of like populating here, and it's looking great. So it's going to give that a few moments just to kind of load in. And the next step is to go to export. Because this is a import thing, you're just going to have to find our, there you go. Cool. So next you want to open up your little window tab. And this is the same step if you've just got Lightroom. However, LR Timelapse just makes it that a little bit more simple. And it lets you choose your resolution. So for today, we're going to go 4K and just do 8 bits. And you want to choose your target folder. Cool. And that's where our photo is going to get saved. It's going to make it an image sequence as well. So basically we'll put like a number after each thing. And this basically just tells the software that's an image sequence and to basically render the whole video as one thing rather than loads of little images. So once you're happy, you just click on export. And this takes a bit of time, so bear with me. Awesome, so as you can see, the little bars disappeared and all our photos have exported nicely. And if we just go back across into LR Timelapse, this render video box has now appeared and it's asking us how we would like to make or render our video. So there's loads of options here, different codecs. I know we do ProRes, click 4K. And because the ratio that we shot the photo at wasn't 16:9, it's asking where we want to kind of crop the image. And there's this little box here, kind of lets you do that. Now I'm actually on an M1 MacBook, and I know there's a new version of LR Timelapse called LR Timelapse 6. However, I'm still using LR Timelapse 5, and I find that the export can be a bit touch and go, and it's not always reliable, and I always find it kind of glitches and messes up. So I'm going to show you another way of how I like to export my time lapses. So I've just loaded up my After Effects project, and I use After Effects for processing my time-lapse sequences into video. And this is just because it gives you great control and lets you kind of make any micro adjustments. So for instance, you could have like wobbly footage, or there could be kind of birds or things like that you might want to mask out. So yeah, using it in Adobe After Effects is definitely the best way to kind of compile your JPEG sequences. So to bring in your JPEG sequence, what you want to do is just go into here, time-lapse exports, tutorial. And yeah, if we go rendered sequence, that's our little image sequence that Lightroom has exported for us, and it's nicely numbered as well. So as you can see, After Effects has detected that this is a JPEG sequence, and it's very important that you make sure this box is ticked, because if it's not, what it's going to do is import hundreds of photos and it's just not going to make it into a video. So you go import JPEG sequence, click on open, and as you can see, it's kind of made a little composition here, and we've got our nice sequence there as well. Now, for some reason, it's really annoying, but After Effects always makes our JPEG sequences 30 frames, and because we're PAL, we want this to be 25, so you just go click on main, interpret footage, and here you can just adjust and tell After Effects what you want it to be. So I want this to be 25 frames, click on OK, and just go open up here, and that should be now playing back at 25 frames, and because it imported it as 30, we're actually gonna have to make this composition a bit longer. So just gonna add on, make it 10 seconds. And we also want it to be 4K as well. So just click on this to make it 4K. Maybe type in tutorial roof 1. Cool. So there we go, got our sequence now. And if I just kind of zoom out, yeah, you can see, look at that. We were missing all that kind of footage there. So what you want to do is just drag that out. I'm just going to bring this back and shorten the sequence. Cool. So we've got our kind of time lapse here. And this is the bit where you want to kind of scale it back a bit just to kind of make it fit into your little time lapse box. Cool. So got it there. And it'd be quite nice because as the time lapse is going, you can sort of see the moon. So it'd be quite nice to kind of keep the moon in the whole shot, but also show some of the rooftop here as well to kind of show the movement of the dolly system. So I think out of the box, that's actually all right. But another thing you can do as well, so say if you've got a static time lapse, you want to introduce a bit of movement, you can kind of keyframe your positions. So if I go back here, let's say we zoom up here and sort of see the top of the skyscraper. And then you maybe want to go the way down more of the floor. Just kind of exaggerates that move even more. So actually that is quite cool. And to make it play back better as well, I'm just going to drop the quality down. Cool, and yeah, and as you can see, we've kind of added in our little position keyframes, and it kind of helps exaggerate that move from the dolly system as well. And actually looks quite cool. But for what we're doing today, I think I'm actually just gonna get rid of our keyframes and just kind of keep it as it was. Boost this back up to here. Cool, yeah, we've got the moon shot. Nice, yeah, it looks really, really great. Cool. So one thing you can do to export is go to the render queue within After Effects. However, as another kind of quality control and just best practice, you always want to do your exports in Media Encoder. So as you can see, it's kind of loaded in our sequence here from After Effects, and it's kind of asking us where we want to save it. So I'm just going to go into here, Wedio, and just click on export, do save. Now for the codecs, I always like to do it in ProRes just because this is a lossless codec and it's very versatile as well, and will often work with most kind of editing softwares like Final Cut and things like that. There's obviously, you can do 444, but I just like to do 422 HQ because I find it's really reliable and never really have any issues with it. If you wanted to do previews or didn't want to have as large a file, you could do H.264. However, you start to run into problems when you start, if you want to manipulate that footage. So yeah, always do your time lapses as ProRes, and you can't really go wrong with that. Cool, so it's going to go on OK and hit export. And as you can see, we've got a little thumbnail here that's rendering out nicely. So there you have it. Time lapses are as easy as that, even motion controlled, complicated ones like this one here.